Hello, Rooted. It's number 34. Okay, so this is the next episode of our 50 Reasons Why Jesus Came to Die. And today we're looking at to enable us to live by faith in him. So I want to start off with Galatians 2, verse 20. I have been crucified with Christ. It is no longer I who live, but Christ who lives in me. And the life I now live in the flesh, I live by faith in the Son of God, who loved me and gave himself up for me. So what is this passage saying? Because it seems to me that Paul is talking about being crucified with Christ, but then having Christ live in him. So what is this craziness going on? Well, John Piper explains it. It sounds like a paradox. And if you've ever watched Stranger Things, I'm a big fan of Stranger Things, the way they talk about a paradox is with a bit of paper, because you've got two sides, two different things happening. And they like push a pen through the paper and then all the worlds collide and then there's aliens and lots of exciting things. But anyway, that is not what's happening here. This actually isn't a paradox. It sounds like a paradox because Paul is saying he's crucified and he lives with Christ, but it's not a paradox. And it sounds like a contradiction. How can you be dead? How can you be alive? But it's not. It's not, because actually what Paul is doing here is he's showing two states of himself. And the first state is, I died. Galatians says, I have been crucified with Christ. So when Paul is talking about this, he actually wasn't crucified. In fact, he's not describing his physical death. Rather, it's picture language for the death of his old self, so his pre-Christ self. And we know that if we look at Romans 6, verse 6, it says, we know that our old self was crucified with him in order that the body of sin might be brought to nothing. So our old self is crucified, our old self is dead, it's gone, it's done. What's the second state? Well, you might have guessed it, the second state is, I live. So Galatians 2 verse 20 says, but Christ who lives in me. It is no longer I who live, but Christ who lives in me. So this is our new self, it's our renewed self, it's different to the old self. But why is it different? Well, it's because the new self is changed by Christ. In fact, it's so different from the old self. It's defined by Christ. Christ lives in me. His presence is the reason why I'm getting through things. His presence is there to help me at all times. He is the one who is strengthening me to carry out his will. Romans 15 verse 18 says, I will not venture to speak of anything except what Christ has accomplished through me. So our new way of life is Christ inhabited, Christ lives in me. It's Christ sustained, he's the one that keeps me going. And it's Christ centered. So that's why faith is so important, because we need Jesus to sustain this new life and we need to trust him moment by moment. Have a look again at Galatians 2 verse 20. And the life I now live in the flesh, I live by faith in the Son of God, who loved me and gave himself up for me. Our new life is described as having Christ living in me. So we need to put our faith in him because he is the one that's sustaining it.